She walked in with a cane, a cardigan, and a smile, just another old woman, they thought, until the whispers turned to laughter, and the laughter turned to silence. Because what no one knew was that Evelyn Monroe had once been the most feared fighter in the world, and she hadn't come back to prove herself. She came back to teach them what strength really looks like: quiet, graceful, unbreakable. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. She stepped out of the faded green city bus just as the clouds broke above Savannah, Georgia, casting fractured sunlight over the cracked sidewalk in front of Silver Tiger Martial Arts. Evelyn Monroe, 74 years old, walked with a slow, practiced gait, her wooden cane tapping against the concrete like a heartbeat. Her cardigan, floral and well-worn, danced faintly in the wind as she stood there for a moment, looking up at the red and white sign above the dojo. Her eyes, hidden behind bifocals, scanned every detail, sharp, deliberate knowing. Inside, the sound of students training echoed through the glass door. The thud of feet, the sharp exhalations with each strike. Evelyn adjusted her scarf, steadied her hands, and walked in. No one expected her. That's the truth. No one inside that dojo had ever seen a woman quite like Evelyn. Small framed, tightly curled silver hair, dark brown skin, weathered like oak, and a calmness that unnerved those who were paying attention, but no one was. Not really. As she entered, the receptionist, barely 19, chewing gum and half watching her phone, blinked in surprise. Her name tag read Brittany, and her voice held that familiar tone of forced politeness and hidden judgment. "Hi there. Can I help you?" "Yes, dear," Evelyn replied with a smile that was warmer than expected. "I was hoping to observe a beginner's class. I'm thinking about enrolling." Brittany paused, glanced at the cane, then at the woman using it. Her mouth twitched, unsure if it should form a smile or a question. You want to take karate?" Evelyn nodded softly. "That's right. Okay. I'll have to check with Coach Harper. You can take a seat over there." She gestured toward a bench lined along the wall beneath a framed poster that read, "Discipline, Respect, Power." Evelyn sat quietly, folding her hands neatly over her cane. Through the large window, she watched the class in motion. Teenagers and young adults in crisp white GIs moved in unison. Their punches snapped. Their stances were wide and aggressive. Their energy, chaotic and raw, filled the room. At the front, a tall man with a black belt and a commanding voice paced with authority, Sensei Marcus Delaney, the dojo's lead instructor. He was in his early 40s, former regional champion, known locally for his flashy style and disciplined drills. As he barked commands, his voice cracked like a whip. "Again, put your hips into it. You're punching with your arms, not your center." Again, Evelyn watched him carefully, not judging, just measuring. Class ended with a clap and a bow. Students broke formation, laughing and grabbing water bottles. That's when Evelyn rose and walked slowly, but with unwavering control, toward the dojo floor. Delaney noticed her immediately. "Ma'am," he asked, approaching. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Evelyn replied. "I'm interested in joining your beginner's class." Before Marcus could answer, laughter erupted behind her. "Oh, man," a cocky voice said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ma'am, the bingo night is 2 doors down." She turned slightly to see a young man, blond, athletic, probably 19, grinning at his friend. Another boy, taller with a buzz cut, joined in. "Come on, Zach," the taller one said. "Don't be mean. She might break a hip before she even breaks a board." Marcus grimaced, shooting them both a look. Kyle. Zach. Enough. But it was too late. The room had caught the scent of amusement, and several others chuckled behind cupped hands. Evelyn remained unbothered. Her smile never wavered. "I assume enrollment is open to all ages." Marcus scratched the back of his neck. "Technically, yes, but our program is very physically demanding. We usually suggest alternatives for more senior students. Tai Chi? Perhaps I'm not looking for an alternative," Evelyn said softly. "Just an opportunity." He hesitated. "It's not personal. It's about safety. We have insurance policies." A door creaked open, and a woman in business, slacks and a clipboard, stepped into view. "Marcus, we need to discuss the new student insurance waivers." Her eyes landed on Evelyn. "Oh, hello? I'm Dana Liu, co-director here. You're Evelyn Monroe." Dana offered a crisp handshake. "Miss Monroe, we're always happy to welcome new students, but I do worry this might not be the best fit. Our classes move quickly, and injuries are a risk." "I understand," Evelyn replied, "but I'm not here to fight tournaments or prove anything. I simply want to learn. If it doesn't work out, I'll step away. No hard feelings." Dana looked over at Marcus, who shrugged. "Well," Dana said, tone shifting ever so slightly, "we are a community-centered facility. We value inclusion. How about we start you on a trial basis?" Evelyn bowed her head. "That's all I ask." 30 minutes later, she was handed a freshly laundered gi too large for her frame and a white belt still stiff from the package. She took her time in the locker room, changing carefully, folding her clothes, precisely before stepping out again. And when she re-entered the training hall, every eye turned. She stood awkwardly, clearly unfamiliar with how to tie the belt. Her arms shook slightly. Her knees bent a little too far. And her cane, now resting against the wall, looked out of place amid the pristine uniforms and padded mats. Zach smirked. "Look alive, everyone. We got ourselves a new recruit, grandma style." Ethan grinned. "Hey, Kyle, maybe she can teach us how to fall and not get up." No one said a word to stop them, not even Marcus. But Evelyn, still calm, still centered, approached him and asked in a gentle voice, "Sensei, is my belt tied correctly?" He adjusted it quickly, avoiding her eyes. "Good enough? Then I'm ready." The class began with stances. She struggled. Her knees creaked. Her balance wobbled. Every block was a second too late. Every punch lacked power, and the whispers behind her grew with each misstep. They didn't see the way she was watching them in return, how her eyes darted from one movement to the next, how her breathing was controlled, how the muscles in her shoulders barely flinched, even as her footwork lagged. They didn't see her fingers curl in precise patterns too precise for a beginner. They only saw the story they wanted, a frail, confused old woman out of her depth. Evelyn let them. She welcomed their misjudgment like a veil. By the time the class ended, she bowed low to Sensei Marcus and said, "Thank you. I'll see you Wednesday." Marcus nodded, still unsure what to make of her. Outside, the wind had picked up. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Evelyn walked to her car alone, her cane tapping that same rhythm, quiet, steady, and unyielding. No one knew. No one guessed. But a storm had entered their dojo that day, and it wore orthopedic shoes and a smile. Evelyn Monroe returned to Silver Tiger Martial Arts 2 days later, her GI folded neatly in a reusable canvas bag, and her stride as steady as the whisper of wind that followed her into the dojo. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly as she entered, casting her reflection into the glass of the trophy case. An elderly black woman, with a cane and quiet eyes, her posture patient, her presence unassuming. No one in the room paused their warm-ups. No one offered a greeting. If anything, her arrival made the air colder. She changed in the locker room this time, managing to tie the white belt a little more neatly. It still drooped awkwardly on one side, and the pants too long, despite her careful hemming, dragged at the heels of her canvas shoes. But Evelyn paid it no mind. She had lived long enough to understand that perception is often the first thing people get wrong. Class began with a series of basic stretches and breathing exercises. Sensei Marcus Delaney moved methodically through the motions, calling out commands with his usual clipped tone. Evelyn joined the others at the back of the mat, lowering herself slowly, her knees crackling with age and defiance. Her movements were shaky, inconsistent. She fell behind almost immediately. Zach and Kyle in their usual corner exchanged glances and stifled laughter. "She's already winded, and we haven't even thrown a punch yet," Kyle whispered. "She's gonna need a stretcher by the time we hit basic blocks," Zach added under his breath. Evelyn heard them. She always did. But she didn't turn her head. She didn't flinch or frown. She simply inhaled deeply, exhaled slower, and focused on the rhythm of her own breathing. She was a master of many things, stillness chief among them. Sensei Delaney paired the students for stance correction. Evelyn was left without a partner until Jasmine Reed, a quiet woman in her early 30s, stepped forward. "I'll work with Ms. Monroe," Jasmine offered. There was a moment of silence. "All right," Marcus said, though something about his voice felt uncertain, as if he'd just agreed to something more complicated than a practice drill. Jasmine gave Evelyn a polite smile. "Ready?" Evelyn nodded. "Let's begin." They moved through basic front stances, then transitioned into back stances and low blocks. Jasmine was competent but tense. Evelyn's form wobbled more than it should have, and twice she had to use the wall to steady herself. But then something strange happened. As Jasmine struggled with her balance during a turn, Evelyn reached out not to catch her, but to adjust her foot placement by an inch, and gesture with a tap to the abdomen where to center her weight. "Breathe here," Evelyn said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not in your shoulders." Jasmine tried again. The difference was immediate. Her posture leveled, her breathing slowed, and her next movement landed with precision. "That was better," Jasmine murmured. Evelyn smiled gently. "That's the idea." Zach rolled his eyes from across the mat. "Maybe we should all take Grandma's Tai Chi class." The others chuckled. Even Sensei Delaney smirked slightly, though he didn't say a word. But Jasmine didn't laugh. She simply nodded at Evelyn and said, "Thanks." Class continued with beginner-level kata. The students moved in unison across the polished floor, punching and turning, blocking and striking. Evelyn stayed a beat behind them all, every step half a second too late, every movement a fraction off. She seemed to forget entire sequences. When the class bowed to end the routine, she was still finishing her last strike out of sync and visibly tired. When they broke for water, Evelyn walked slowly to her bag, dabbing her forehead with a handkerchief. Behind her, Zach performed a dramatic imitation of her movements hunching his back and pretending to fall. Kyle laughed so hard he choked on his water. Jasmine watched in silence, her expression unreadable. Later that night, long after the dojo had closed, Evelyn walked to Forsyth Park beneath the canopy of oaks draped in Spanish moss. She made her way to a quiet corner, lit only by moonlight and the occasional flicker of passing headlights. There, in the grass, still warm from the day's sun, Evelyn removed her shoes and began to move. Gone was the wobble. Gone was the hesitation. She moved with a grace that defied logic, as though gravity itself dared not interfere. Her form shifted from stance to stance, each motion a calligraphy stroke etched into the air. A palm strike glided forward like a river's current. A pivot rolled through her hips like a wave collapsing into shore. Her breathing was deep, controlled, almost musical. Behind a tree, Jasmine stood frozen, her gym bag still slung over one shoulder. She had come to run to clear her mind after another frustrating class, but what she saw now silenced every doubt she'd carried. Evelyn moved like someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. At the end of the kata, Evelyn stopped at center. She took one long inhale, then exhaled through her nose. The stillness afterward was almost holy. She turned toward the shadows and spoke without looking. "You might as well come out, Jasmine. The bugs will eat you alive out there." Embarrassed, Jasmine stepped forward. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to spy." "You did," Evelyn replied, smiling. "But that's all right. The truth usually needs witnesses." Jasmine looked down. "Why? Why pretend? Why let them laugh at you like that?" Evelyn walked to the bench and sat down, crossing her hands over her knees. There are many kinds of strength, but the rarest kind is the strength to be underestimated. Jasmine sat beside her, still in awe. "I don't get it." "You will," Evelyn said, "in time." A few days later, Jasmine returned to the library where she worked part-time. Between reshelving books and answering reference questions, she opened an old martial arts anthology and flipped through the pages. One name caught her eye: Evelyn Monroe, champion of the Okinawa Invitational 1974. Known as the Phoenix Palm for her fluid rising techniques and near telepathic anticipation in the ring. The text was brief, the photo missing. But Jasmine didn't need a picture anymore. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. And she knew this: whatever Evelyn Monroe was doing in that dojo, it wasn't for glory or nostalgia. It was something deeper, something unfinished. It started with a breathless moment caught on camera. One of the younger students at Silver Tiger, eager to boost their social media following, had recorded a short clip during class. In the video, Evelyn Monroe shuffled awkwardly through a basic drill, seemingly off balance. In the background, Zach's exaggerated impressions drew laughter from a few students. What the student didn't intend to capture, what the algorithm somehow chose to spotlight, was the 30-second moment after class had ended. Evelyn, unaware the camera was still rolling, stood alone on the edge of the mat. The others had already dispersed. She closed her eyes, and in a movement so quick it looked unreal, she shifted from a slouched posture to a perfectly aligned stance. Her hands flowed through a short, seamless sequence of kata. The snap of her sleeve was audible. Her focus was absolute. Then, as quickly as it had begun, she seemed to melt back into stillness, hunched once more, the old woman with the cane. The video was posted without a caption. Within 24 hours, it had over 10,000 views. Comments ranged from mockery to awe, but one user wrote something that changed everything. "Anyone else thinks she moves like Evelyn Monroe, the Phoenix Palm?" That name hadn't been spoken aloud in decades, not in dojos, not in magazines, certainly not in this sleepy southern city. But it resonated. Jasmine Reed read the comment with a chill crawling up her spine. She had already begun suspecting something. She'd seen Evelyn in the park, felt the weight of her silence, the poise in her corrections. Now, she dove headfirst into the archives. She searched local library databases, martial arts forums, old scanned editions of Black Belt magazine. And there, tucked between fading tournament brackets and dusty interviews, she found it. Okinawa Invitational, 1974. Champion Evelyn Monroe. Nickname, the Phoenix Palm-style hybrid, Shotokan known for evasive transitions and internal force redirection. Noted withdrew suddenly from competition in 1975, following a personal conflict in Tokyo. There were no photos attached, but a quote stood out. She moved like she wasn't fighting her opponent, she was dancing with the air around them. Jasmine sat back stunned. She thought about the woman who had helped her correct her breathing, the way Evelyn absorbed ridicule without anger, the kata in the moonlight, the clipped, precise way she never complained, never reacted, but always saw everything. She didn't know what to do with the information, so she showed up at class the next day, watching Evelyn more intently, no longer measuring her by what she appeared to lack, but by what she might be choosing to hide. She noticed things others didn't, how Evelyn's feet always landed at the correct angles, even when the rest of her body appeared uncoordinated, how her breathing synced perfectly with the rhythm of the class, and how her mistakes seemed almost too convenient. Evelyn noticed Jasmine watching. Their eyes met for a split second, and Jasmine thought she saw something pass across the older woman's face, acknowledgement perhaps, or warning. Later that evening, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed, the glow of her laptop lighting up her small apartment. She pulled out her phone and clicked on the video again. This time, she uploaded it to her private account, but she didn't leave it alone. She added a caption. What if you spent your life mastering something, then returned to it as a stranger? She didn't tag Evelyn. She didn't mention names. But the video had already caught fire. It was too late to stop what came next. The next morning, Evelyn stepped into the dojo and felt the shift immediately. Eyes lingered longer. Conversation stopped abruptly when she passed. There was no laughter today, only silence edged with curiosity and unease. During warm-ups, Sensei Marcus Delaney approached her, his expression guarded. "Ms. Monroe," he said quietly, "you've, attracted some attention. That clip from last week's class has gone viral. People are asking questions. Big questions." Evelyn didn't look at him. She simply said, "Let them." He hesitated. "I've also received a call from someone in Tokyo, a man named Satoshi Takeda. Said he's an old acquaintance. He's coming to Savannah." That made her pause. "Takeda is coming here?" She asked, her voice distant. Marcus nodded. "He said he trained with you 50 years ago." Evelyn said nothing more. She finished her stretches and went through the entire class with quiet resolve. She fumbled her stances, deliberately missed her marks, played her part with more commitment than ever. But Jasmine couldn't unsee what she knew. She watched Evelyn with burning awareness, the way one might look at a painting they've seen 1,000 times, only to discover it holds a secret message. That evening, Jasmine returned to Forsyth Park. She hoped Evelyn might be there, as she had been before. And she was. Evelyn stood in the clearing, her shoes off her GI replaced with loose athletic pants and a simple tank top. She moved slowly, but not out of age, out of reverence. Her kata tonight was different. It had more force, sharper pivots, a snap in every gesture. Jasmine watched silently from behind a tree, unsure whether to interrupt. And then, without looking, Evelyn spoke. "Is this where you come to spy now?" Jasmine stepped forward. "I didn't mean to." "You did. Again." Evelyn turned to face her. "But this time, you're not hiding it." "I found the article," Jasmine admitted. "The tournament. The name. You're her, aren't you?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on a bench nearby and gestured for Jasmine to join her. "I was her," Evelyn said finally. "Before things got complicated." "What happened?" Jasmine asked. "Why walk away from all of it?" "There are victories that cost too much," Evelyn replied. "There are arenas where the price of winning is your soul. I walked into one of those once, and I didn't leave unscathed." Jasmine was silent for a while. "You could have come back as a master. Everyone would have listened." Evelyn gave a small smile. "People don't really listen when they think they already know who you are. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to be underestimated." Jasmine looked down. "So what now? Everyone's watching you. They know." Evelyn's eyes turned toward the night sky. "Then it's time they watch something worth remembering." A long pause settled between them. The cicadas sang in the trees. The stars flickered above. And Jasmine knew this wasn't just about karate. It was about truth, about legacy, about what's buried being brought to light, not with anger, but with quiet, unwavering resolve. And somewhere across the ocean, a shadow stirred. Because when a forgotten name rises again, it always wakes the ghosts that buried it. The morning after Satoshi Takeda arrived in Savannah, the front windows of Silver Tiger Martial Arts were shattered. Glass glittered on the sidewalk like ice jagged and cruel in the early light. Inside, the mats had been slashed equipment, overturned, the mirror defaced with a single word painted in red shame. It was an act of precision, not rage. Someone had known exactly where to cut, what to destroy. Not a random break-in, not kids. A message. Sensei Marcus Delaney stood in the wreckage, his hands clenched. He hadn't called the police yet. He didn't know what to say. Evelyn Monroe, however, stood beside him with remarkable calm. "They found me," she said simply, "just like I always feared they would." Takeda, quiet and composed, in a pressed gray suit, stood in the doorway. His presence brought with it a quiet gravity. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but certain. "It's not just about you anymore, Evelyn. Kojiro's son has taken up his father's vendetta, and he's here. Hiroshi." She said the name like old steel on her tongue. "He was just a child when I left." "He's not a child now," Takeda replied. "He's trained, disciplined, and very much his father's son." Evelyn said nothing, but the weight in her posture deepened. Later that evening, while the dojo was closed for repairs, Evelyn met with Marcus and Jasmine in the back office. They sat in silence for several minutes before Marcus finally asked the question that had been sitting on his chest since the first crack in Evelyn's disguise appeared. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Evelyn's gaze was steady. "Because names are heavy. People treat you differently when they think they know your story. I needed to understand the soul of this place, and I couldn't do that if I walked in with legend behind me." Jasmine looked down at her hands, her voice soft. "But now the past is here, whether we're ready or not." Evelyn nodded. "I've spent half my life running from one match, one decision. I let pride pull me into something I couldn't walk away from clean. I was supposed to throw a fight in Tokyo. A championship match. Kojiro had money riding on it. I refused. I won. And in doing so, I exposed everything he'd built. You did the right thing, Marcus said. Evelyn turned to him, her expression unreadable. Doing the right thing doesn't mean you don't pay for it. It was Marcus who suggested the challenge. If Hiroshi wants a fight, he said you should face him, but do it on our terms, at the upcoming regional tournament. Jasmine flinched. You want her to fight in public. She's 74, but Evelyn smiled. This fight isn't about proving who's stronger. It's about ending something that should have ended decades ago. I won't strike to hurt, but I will strike to teach. Word spread quickly that Evelyn Monroe the Phoenix Palm would face Hiroshi Kojiro in an unsanctioned exhibition at the regional event. Most people assumed it was a hoax. Some called it a stunt. But those who knew those who remembered felt the tremor in their bones. At the tournament, Hiroshi arrived with no fanfare. His GI was spotless, his demeanor as cold as the concrete beneath his feet. When he stepped onto the mat across from Evelyn, the crowd hushed. They bowed. She held his eyes. He refused to look away. He struck first, sharp, technical controlled. She moved with fluid deflection, her body responding not with counterforce, but with quiet redirection. It was a dialogue, not a duel. A conversation through motion between a woman who had lived long enough to stop fighting for approval and a man who had inherited a war he didn't start. Blow after blow, Hiroshi pressed forward, his techniques relentless. But Evelyn remained still, inside, like the center of a storm. When the moment came, she stepped into his final strike and placed her palm flat and open over his chest. She did not follow through. She didn't have to. The match was over. And for the first time, Hiroshi lowered his eyes. You could have ended me, he whispered. I did, she said gently, but not the way you think. As they bowed again, this time with real acknowledgement, the crowd rose not for victory, but for grace. Old ghosts had been summoned, but it was new lessons that walked away from the mat. Weeks after the tournament, Silver Tiger Martial Arts reopened with repaired mirrors, new mats, and a different kind of energy pulsing through its walls. The story of Evelyn Monroe had shifted from whispered rumors to spoken reverence. Students now watched her with eyes sharpened, not by curiosity or disbelief, but by respect. The woman who once seemed frail now stood at the center of the dojo's transformation, not as a symbol of combat, but as a testament to something far greater, the endurance of character. She never demanded the spotlight. She never sought to reclaim titles or titles lost to time. What Evelyn did was quieter, deeper. She rewrote the culture of the dojo, not through speeches, but through presence. Her humility softened egos. Her resilience challenged assumptions. Where once there was mockery and division, now there was reflection and unity. Even Zach and Kyle, once the loudest voices of ridicule, now showed up early to stretch beside her, learning with an attentiveness they had never shown before. Sensei Marcus, humbled and awakened, stepped back more often to watch her teach. Not through formal instruction, but through small corrections, gentle nudges, and storytelling that carried more weight than any technique. When Jasmine asked her why she never told anyone the full truth sooner, Evelyn simply replied, because truth needs the right soil to grow. Sometimes you have to wait for people to be ready. Her influence extended beyond the dojo. News outlets picked up her story. Former students and martial artists from decades past wrote letters, some apologizing, others simply grateful to know she still walked among them. At the local community center, She began offering free classes twice a week for seniors, emphasizing movement, breath, and confidence. She called it the Still Blade. A. When asked what rank she now held, Evelyn only smiled. Belts are fabric, she said. Character is the only rank that matters. One afternoon, a new student arrived, a timid girl of about 11, skin the color of deep mahogany eyes, always on the floor. Her mother said she was being bullied, that she'd lost her voice. Evelyn knelt to the child's level, took her hand, and said, "Good. That means you're ready to find it." Months passed. Seasons turned. The cane Evelyn once leaned on now rested more often in the corner untouched. She still moved slower than most, but no one mistook that for weakness anymore. She had nothing left to prove, and everything left to give. In the silence between drills, in the stillness before a bow, her legacy settled not in the belts or the trophies, but in the hearts she'd reshaped. Strength, they came to understand, isn't measured in how loudly you enter a room, but in how deeply you remain when the world finally learns to listen. In a quiet corner of Savannah, Georgia, an elderly black woman named Evelyn Monroe stepped into a karate dojo, cane in hand, and disrupted everything the world thought it understood about strength. Mocked, underestimated, and labeled as out of place, she let the world believe what it wanted. Not out of fear, but out of purpose. Beneath every stumble and shaky stance was the quiet precision of a legend who had once ruled the martial arts world as the Phoenix Palm. But Evelyn no longer needed the roar of applause or the validation of medals. She had come not to reclaim her past, but to test the hearts of those around her and to awaken a new kind of strength in a place that had forgotten its roots. What followed was not a flashy comeback, but a transformation from ridicule to respect, from performance to principle. As whispers of her past became public truth, Evelyn didn't deny them. She simply stood taller, not to glorify who she was, but to embody what she had learned, that true mastery lies not in domination, but in discipline, restraint, and grace. She faced her old rival's son not to settle a score, but to close a wound for herself, for a community, and for a legacy that had gone silent for too long. And when the fight ended, it wasn't about who won, but what was healed. Evelyn didn't rebuild the dojo with wood or glass. She rebuilt it with presence, with her quiet corrections, with her belief in students others had dismissed, with the way she turned laughter into listening and skepticism into respect. She never shouted her wisdom. She simply lived it until others had no choice but to follow. The lesson in Evelyn's story is not just about martial arts. It's about life. In a world obsessed with performance and visibility, Evelyn teaches us that power can come softly, that it's okay to be underestimated if it allows you to move through the world on your terms. That character outlasts fame. That quiet resilience can bend even the most rigid assumptions. And that healing, whether personal, generational, or cultural, often begins in places of humility. So what can we take from Evelyn Monroe? We learn that aging is not diminishing, it's refining. That being overlooked doesn't mean being irrelevant. And that our greatest impact often comes not when we try to impress the world, but when we quietly challenge it to be better, through patience, wisdom, and an unwavering sense of purpose. If Evelyn's story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something deeper than just inspiration, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe to our channel and support the voices and stories that too often go unheard. Your support gives us the strength to continue uncovering powerful truths, one story at a time. Let's keep these stories alive. Let's keep the legacy growing.